All right, good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the September 12th version of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Town of Fountain Hills. Would you please rise for Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence? All right, moving into tonight's agenda. Agenda item 3, call to the public. Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, we do.
Very good.
We have Jane Bell.
Chairman and Commissioners, I would like to bring to your attention the need for change for the noise code. They can't hear me? Okay. There is a new statute, HB 2389, that has been through the, improved through the House, and it's going to the Senate. In this, they are trying to take and do law enforcement using the decibels to designate whether something is too loud. I have put in your packet there for you the 3 areas, Maricopa County, Paradise Valley, and Scottsdale have that right now. At night, their decibels are 45 from 10 to 7 a.m., and Scottsdale's is 45 from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I hope this information might give you some ideas to help develop a new noise code. It needs to be able to be enforced by law enforcement. This would help the house, the neighbors, with the rentals, and for sober living. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bell. John, is staff's aware of the House bill in circulation? I know we picked up this topic, I'm going to say, what, 18 months or so ago, looking at decibel meters as it related to noise complaints and so on, and the sheriff's office was not in favor of metering at that time, if I recall.
Yes, that's correct. We have recently done some amendments to that code, but as a call to the public item, we really can't discuss it this evening. We'll just take it under advisement.
So we can just make a note of that for future study. Okay, thank you, John. All right, I'm going to slip in a roll call here between agenda item 3 and 4.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note for the record that all commissioners are present and that we have a quorum.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very expeditious. All right, agenda item number 4, consideration and possible action approving the regular meeting minutes of the Planning and Zoning Commission from June 13th, 2022. Commissioners, any discussion or a motion, please?
I would like to make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of the Planning and Zoning Commission June 13th, 2022 meeting.
Commissioners, a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 7-0. All right, agenda item number 5, public hearing, consideration and possible action regarding a rezone of a property at 17205 East Shea Boulevard, approximately 1.43 acres, generally located approximately 1,400 feet southeast of the southeast corner of North Saguaro Boulevard and East Shea Boulevard, from the C1 zoning designation neighborhood commercial and professional to C2 intermediate commercial zoning district. Farhad, your presentation, please.
Yes. Okay, well, that's not it. There we go. Okay. Thank you, and good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, and the public. As you mentioned, this request is for a rezone for a we'll talk about the subject property later, but from the C1 zoning district to the C2. In other words, from neighborhood commercial and professional to the C2 or intermediate commercial district to allow a live fire practice range indoor. The subject property for this request is a 1.43 acre developed property located about 1,200 feet or so northwest of the intersection of Shea Boulevard and State Route 87, or as I mentioned in the report, if you prefer, 1,400 feet southeast of Saguaro and Shea Boulevard. It is home to a 7,500 square foot empty shell building currently. Well, actually, it's currently being improved. I'll discuss that a little bit more later, but it has sat vacant for quite some time, actually since 2008, since the property was developed with the existing buildings that you see on there right now. It is connected to a neighboring parcel here immediately to the southeast and is part of a much larger commercial strip center. As I mentioned, I've summarized the request here in the beginning real quick. It's a rezone from a C1 to a C2. It's for a proposed indoor live fire range. It's going to be within an existing 7,500 square foot building, part of which is currently being improved, tenant improvements for a gun shop, which Planning and Zoning staff has determined that it is a allowable use by right within the C1 zoning district. What we found questionable is the live fire range that was being proposed, and hence the reason for the rezone request before you. Wanted to talk about a little bit more in detail the difference between a C1 and the C2 district and what is intended market area is. In the zoning ordinance, the C1 zoning district is intended to accommodate modest, well-designed commercial enterprises to serve a surrounding residential neighborhood. It is intended to integrate limited commercial activity and professional offices within residential land uses in a climate favorable to both. And particular attention should be given to the interface between commercial and professional uses within the neighborhood which surrounds it. So in summary, the C1 and the uses listed in the zoning ordinance are intended to serve the neighboring community within a smaller radius than a C2 would. And so by comparison, a C2 is intended to provide the sale of commodities and the performance of services and other activities in which the market area extends beyond the immediate neighborhood. Is designed for application at major street intersections, which the subject property is not right at the corner of a major street intersection. It's about 1,400 feet from Saguaro and Shea, as I mentioned. Staff has determined that, based on these definitions for a C2 use, staff has determined that an indoor live fire range most closely falls under this zoning classification, because it's intended to serve a much broader area. And I believe the applicant's representative just joined us. As I mentioned, the existing zoning district is a C1. I redid the aerial photograph that I showed you earlier to give you a much wider picture of what the neighboring zoning districts are. The subject property is adjacent to the R143 zoning district, particularly to the south and to the west. It's the older phase of Fire Rock, and all the larger lots here that you see are developed with single-family residences. Some higher density development, as you can see here, with the R5 zoning district here, and quite a bit further away across the street to the east is the R18 zoning district with, I believe that's just southeast of Montera. And then across the street to the east is the C2 zoning district, the Desert Dog establishment, I believe a number of other similar uses, and directly to the south is C1 as well. It's the Arizona propane business. Now, along with the C2 zoning district, aside from the uses that are listed there, comes with it a number of development standards that vary significantly from the C1 designation. So allowed by right in the C2 are drive-through windows, 24-hour operations, whether it be a pharmacy or a drive-through fast food window, and it also allows 40-foot buildings. Now, to be clear, the building that's out there right now is well under 40 feet, but the possibility would remain, should this rezone be approved, no matter how remote, that the building could be replaced by another much taller building, or maybe retrofitted with a second floor. The applicant didn't provide an existing site plan. Just so you'll have your bearings straight, north is towards the lower right hand going of the slide here. But this is Shea Boulevard right here. There's one driveway leading into the shopping center. I mentioned the attached units here. These include businesses such as State Farm. I believe there's a neuropathic health center there, as well as Remax building, and I believe Roof King. This is the 7,500 square foot unit in which the applicant is improving. About half the unit will consist of the gun shop. It's this area here in the hatch that would be used for the live fire range. Again, it will be entirely insulated so as to allow noise not to escape the building. And this is a rendering from the architect. Again, the building is existing. The only thing that's not existing that you see here are the sails that you see in the foreground there. I did go out there and take pictures of some of the existing conditions of the site. This is taken from Shea Boulevard just to depict the fact that it is set back quite a ways from Shea Boulevard. The slide on the right is Cirrus Wash, which the parcel is adjacent to. This obviously is taken, the slide on the left particularly is taken from within the center. You can see in the back, in the background, perhaps barely, a wall. It's about an 8-foot wall, a portion of which is retaining. Here on the right is the parcel taken from Fire Brick Road, directly to the south. So you can see both angles. In the immediate foreground is the ADA access coming off of Fire Brick Road. Again, I mentioned the wall is about 8 feet tall from within the center, but if you look at the other side, I'm sorry, I don't have a picture here, but it doesn't, it's not quite as tall from the other side. I would say at most maybe only about half that wall is exposed from the other side. So Section 2.01 establishes standards for review of the rezone requests, and upon looking at that and the nature of the request, staff's recommending denial of the rezone request because of some of the potential impacts should, again, no matter how remote the applicant's plans fall through. So recommending, again, denial specifically for the rezone request because of concerns over the 24-hour operation, potential for that, the drive-throughs, and the 40-foot building height allowance, which staff believes, as far as the rezone request is concerned, and not the use per se, is incompatible with the neighboring zoning district, which is R143, large lot residential. there would be no transition of zoning, like a transition use in between. Alternatively, and this is important, staff may, or rather, the commission may reject the rezone request, but also direct staff to, or actually recommend to council a zoning text amendment to specifically allow the use that the applicant is requesting here for this particular parcel in the C1 zoning district, because it's currently not listed there right now, or a reinterpretation of staff's categorization of this use within any one of the commercial districts. So with that, I'll end my presentation. The owners of the gun shop are here as well to answer any questions you might have.
Very good. And do you guys have a presentation as well that you'd like to make, or? No, sir. Okay. Commissioners, questions for Farhad? Commissioner Watts?
Is there a reason that we move forward with the C2 zoning as opposed to the recommendation to do the C1? It seems like, looking at your website, you guys operate 9 to 5, basically. Yes, sir. And the C1 would be more applicable. It would, again with the move. Sorry about the microphone. The C1 seems to be more applicable than the C2, so I would be in support of C1 and including it as one. A couple of questions for the applicant, though, about, looks like security is all front door, not back door. So you'd have access out the back for loading maybe, but not for members.
Exactly. The front, right now there's 4 cameras, but there will be 16 outside. And the key card locks, and we already have a security gate installed. The back doors are for only gonna be access to the range, so no public access or private member access. It's only for staff. Okay. And that would be mostly cleaning, so it wouldn't be access from the back. The delivery is on the side of the building, and then the main entrance will be on the Shea side.
And all the lighting looks like it was downlighting, because I walked that property too, so it's all downlighting.
Yes,
doesn't
sir.
reflect up, and your hours would eliminate that issue as well.
Right. Our architect had gotten some complaints, and I'm willing to answer any questions you've obviously got them to, I'm sure, that I can answer about some of the things we've done to help work with the community.
Are there caliber limitations? I looked especially to the east side, the east of the firing range itself. Looks like it's a CMU wall, but I don't know if it's a solid wall, a tilt wall, or what, so.
So I brought the range engineer. I'm gonna let him step up and he can answer all the range questions, because it's a professional range that we're having built. And then I'll answer any other questions you have.
Okay.
This is Chris from Action Target.
Yeah, hello. I'll be the subject matter expert for any shooting range design or safety issues or questions. So I'm Chris Hart with Action Target. I've built indoor ranges for 17 years, and we've built over 50 in Arizona, about 400 total. So I've seen everything that you can build, and happy to answer any questions about this project.
So the questions for containment, not so much for noise, but for containment, is that east wall as well as the ceiling. Now,
Yes.
it's unusual to have a projectile go through the ceiling, but it definitely has happened and so I was curious about that. And that's more of a building code issue than anything else, but the east wall bothered me a little bit, looking at it and not seeing anything that was identified as being a CMU solid wall.
Yeah, great question. So when we build a range, our industry standard that we build to is 4 concrete walls. We're basically building a bunker within this building. And so not only for sound, but for containment, so that if any of the equipment were to fail in the future, we still have a secondary barrier, which is a concrete wall that even rifle rounds cannot go through. And so that's what the applicant has done, Mr. Southland has done with this space, is build that bunker, that box within a box. And then overhead, we do ballistic AR-500 baffles that prevent any direct fire round from leaving the building. And this is the same design that we build on law enforcement ranges, FBI indoor ranges, U.S. military ranges. It's the same exact design that all of those public agencies use but we're doing it on the commercial side.
So there is a wall on the east end of the range that it just isn't shown on the plan. It isn't hatched the same way.
All 4 of the walls should be concrete, and that's the way it is designed.
Yeah, but that is in phase 2. But yes, that's gonna be the outside wall is only one layer. We're building a whole, basically rectangle inside. But it's very expensive, so we're waiting until the zoning gets approved or whatever we work out with the city before we, incur that expense.
That covers mine, thank you.
Commissioner Kovacevic?
So how many people do you expect to be, if you're at capacity, how many people are in your
At
in your shopping on the
capacity,
range?
it's an 8-lane. So it's really set up as a private membership. It'll be unlike the actual public ranges like Scottsdale and basically we're gonna be the only private range that I know about. So it's 8 lanes. And that means you're looking at 1 person an hour per lane. That's 8 people in an hour. So in an 8-hour day, you could have 64 different people show up.
But 8 at a time.
Yes, it's 8
And then
lanes.
maybe you have 8 people there 5 minutes
Staging.
before the top of the hour waiting for their.
Yeah, so we have a lounge for people to wait, and then we clear the range, and then the new group goes in.
Okay. Oh, man, it's hard getting old. Is there anything about the range, I mean, the difference between C1 and C2 that Farhad, you're going to a 40-foot ceiling, 24-hour operation. Are the members going to be able to use this for 24 hours? Or you have an hour, what are your hours?
No, it'll be secured. There'll be a range officer on staff, and the only time that it can be used is when there's a range officer on staff.
And so what hours are you planning?
Well, currently, our hours are 9 to 5. On Saturdays and Sundays, we're 10 to 4. I assume we will probably extend that and just keep it 9 to 5 or 9 to 6. But we'll fill in an 8-hour day. Our maximum capacity that we're planning on is 1,000 members.
Okay. But realistically, maybe you have, including the retail shop, maybe you have 25, 30 people in there at one time.
Yeah, we won't. I don't think we'll have that many, but yeah.
So why? So based on the use, this just doesn't sound like a whole lot of people. Why are you requiring the upzoning?
Okay, well, you guys are all from the same place, so we already have a gun shop.
No,
We're going on
that's a
year
question
3
for
now.
staff. That's my question for
okay.
staff.
Yeah, so-
I don't expect you to answer that one.
We're just doing what you guys tell us to do because we want to make sure we do everything right, so.
Yeah, no, I understand. So put some meat on the bones on why you're requiring C2 zoning.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Kovacevic, as I mentioned earlier, in the definitions for the C2 zone, the uses allowed within the C2 zone are intended to attract a much broader area beyond the immediate neighborhood. Uses such a cafe, for example, or like a Subway or a Starbucks or whatever, not to endorse those businesses, but is intended to serve the immediate neighborhood, say within a half-mile or even a mile radius. But a C2 may very well attract folks from beyond the town limits and find it worth their while to commute a much larger distance to visit this venue. And just by way of comparison, the C2 use, if some of the uses listed under C2 include billiard hall, studios, such as a dance studio, music studio, art studio. The one use listed in the C1 district that you could say perhaps most closely resembles this type of use is an amusement arcade. That's specifically listed in the C1 use. But in terms of intensity, staff felt that it's a little bit more intense than an amusement arcade.
And I'm not hearing that from the applicant. I'm hearing maybe they get 25 people,
Right.
if that.
Chair, Commissioner Kovacevic, we agree, and we struggle with it a little bit, but we have to look at the use as a whole. And if we're going to say this use is allowed as a C1, they could just as easily be doing something that's going to draw 100 people and be, 3 or 4 times as large. Once we say the use is allowed in the district, we can't just focus it on this one operation that's going to have a limited number of people.
I think the challenge to that, though, would be C1 parcels just aren't large enough to accommodate that type of volume anyway,
Often that's the
generally
case.
speaking.
And so, but that's, because we struggle with some of these same things, that's why I had Farhad put in the report this option of, because it says right in the code, if somebody wants to challenge, my classification, that it can be appealed and the council can direct us to assign it in a different district. So we wanted to have this discussion, because again, we struggled, and I came down the side of the C2 because of some of the potential environmental concerns that Mr. Watts was kind of asking about. We are right next to a residential neighborhood, because it could be a larger facility, that kind of thing. So we're certainly comfortable if you want to recommend, and the council would decide that, yes, this really does fit as a C1 use. We've decided that as a community and not just me sitting in my office.
Okay. All right, that's all for now, Commissioner.
I'll circle down here,
Go
I'll
ahead.
swing back to you. Commissioner DePauw.
Yeah, I had, my question was more related to this handicap access, access coming from Fire Brick Drive. Does that lead straight onto Fire Brick Drive? Yeah, is there any parking back there as well? No. So that's just mainly for residents in the area to access the site?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, that's correct.
Okay.
It's, yeah, it comes off the sidewalk of Fire Brick Drive. And it actually, interestingly, there's a dead end not far away from where you see the photo
So
depicted here.
this may potentially lead to some parking back there as well, overflows or
Correct. In fact, there's parking there right now behind the building.
behind the building,
There.
on Fire Brick.
Oh, on Fire Brick. There's no, I beg your pardon? There's no parking?
That's just a private, well, I guess it's public.
Yeah,
but
it's a
they
public
pay private
road.
'cause they-
I'm just not sure if there are no parking signs there, if it's,
Now,
Signed as
also,
such.
I was just thinking, for this zoning, are there any concerns with the indoor air quality when we talk about lead contamination? And well, can we speak a little bit on the ventilation?
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Do you want me to explain how the ventilation system works?
Sure.
So we take 100% fresh air outside the building, city's air, right, going in through a filter system into the range, 75 feet per minute. All the air in that range is exchanged once per minute, so quite a bit of airflow. And then we recycle 75%. There's carbon monoxide monitoring, but everything that's exhausted out of the range is HEPA grade, hospital grade air through those HEPA filters. So the air that's coming out of the range is cleaner than the city's air that's going in. And that's by default. It has safeguards built in with controls so that if there were an issue, it would sound an alarm and shut down the system. But totally safe, 100% safe for anyone to use.
And air going out is also filtered.
Yeah, so again, so it's cleaner than the city's air going in. It is HEPA filtered, and at that point, it's considered hospital-grade air through that HEPA filter. So yes, it is clean.
Hospital grade, what MERV rating is there?
That's the 99.7% HEPA rating, the MERV 17 filters.
Okay.
So almost what a hospital uses, but on a different scale, because we're exchanging all the air in that range once per minute. Quite a bit of airflow.
Okay.
Yeah, so if there are questions related to that, sound, the range design, I'm happy to answer any of those for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just one quick question on the range design. So as I'm looking at the map, as I'm looking at the design, is the firing taking place like from the front of the building to the back of the building?
Depends how you're looking. If you want to bring up a top view, we can talk in angles, aerial photo.
As you're doing that, if you could just help my naive understanding of the world, what, a special bullet trap area?
A bullet trap?
Yeah, there's on the,
Yeah.
what would that be, the south wall?
So on this project, we've spec'd a granular rubber trap, and what is it? It's 100% recycled rubber that's recycled, created into a bullet trap, and it functions a lot like a dirt berm, an angled dirt berm, but one that's made of chopped rubber granules so that we can recycle and mine the lead out and recycle it. So 100% of the brass and the lead used in this type of range is recycled. As we look at this plot right here, so the range is shooting from northwest corner to southeast corner.
Oh, like the long way, I would
I don't
say?
think I have a pointer, but, oh, good. So, here we go. Okay. If you see my pointer right here,
Yeah.
firing line is back here, and shooting towards this direction where the bullet trap would be.
So Farhad, could we use the blow up? It's page 20 of the packet.
Yeah.
It'd be a lot easier for us to,
Absolutely.
Of the site plan?
it'd be the very next page after the site plan.
Over there?
There you go.
Just expand it.
So you can see the sails here in the front. This is facing Shea Boulevard. We've got the firing line back here, and the bullet trap is over on this end of the building. So we're in a different direction than what we just saw in the overhead, but this gives you an idea of the layout of the building.
So to clarify, they're firing to the left.
Firing to the left, bullet trap on this end, firing line here, firing to our left on this diagram.
And the inside, I can see that box, the concrete walls that you were referring to earlier.
Yes.
But I don't see it on the left side
Right here,
where the bullets would be going. Yeah.
there's a bullet trap here,
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
and then all of these are concrete walls.
Got it. And there's like 8 lanes there, you were saying?
8 lanes wide, yes.
Okay.
So I'm just curious, why a bullet trap parallel to the shooting lane?
Perpendicular to the shooting lane, right?
Well, that's not how it's depicted on the drawing.
Right here, the bullet trap goes across the width of the range. If I'm standing right here where my cursor is and I'm shooting this direction, this is the bullet trap right here. So it spans across the entire width of the shooting range at the end.
So there's a layer issue in the CAD drawing, because the bullet trap is shown in that corridor across the top of the drawing there, parallel to the range.
No.
Oh, that's a service corridor.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe they were just swapped.
Yeah,
They
there's
were
something wrong in the
mislabeled.
labeling in the CAD drawing, because
Okay.
they're flip-flopped,
And
at
again,
least on the packet we got.
We have not completed full drawings for this project until it's
And it's
approved,
erroneous
so,
to a
yeah.
zoning anyway, I just
Yeah.
was really confused by that.
But any questions like that, I could see why that would be confusing the way it's labeled. So
Okay.
if there are any questions or any confusion, I'd love to answer that for you.
And just for point of reference, Commissioner Watts's opening statement about box within the box, that, you know, where that bullet trap is, I guess I thought the same thing, that there would be concrete
Another
CMU behind the bullet trap. Which there's not, we're saying.
There should be. Now, we haven't completed the full plan, but all 4 walls of that new range should have concrete. So it's not shown right here because it hasn't been improved, but it is planned.
Okay.
That clarifies, because the way that it's designed, if they were shooting that way, there's nothing.
Correct.
It says no concrete right into the service area, so I think that's where we were concerned with, so,
This wall where my pointer is,
Yeah.
this does need to be concrete CMU,
okay.
even if it's behind it.
That black is all solid filled CMU, 11 feet high.
Yep, okay.
Okay, we're going into the weeds here, but I'm confused again, because I thought we were talking about a box within a box, and that looks like an exterior wall to me.
This right here,
Yeah.
you can pour a wall inside of it with a footing,
Yeah,
which is what
Is that the
the applicant
intention?
plans to do.
Okay.
that's what has to be
I mean, Roof King would probably prefer that, I would guess, but,
Right.
done. Yeah, they might. But in front of that.
especially if Corey's shooting, that's gonna be a big problem.
So, yeah, the bullet trap itself is not gonna let anything through. The solid filled wall is that second
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
I do have materials I can pass out that shows all of this equipment as well, so.
Not relevant to a zoning case.
But it's cool if you want to see what's going to be on that.
Commissioner Dempster.
Thank you. I think this is an exciting project, and I'm curious if I may ask, how did you choose Fountain Hills for the location?
Well, I'm a resident, and we own Neural Health Solutions, and we live here, so
Just saw
I
the
always try to
opportunity.
bring, I try to purchase my products from local business owners, and I've been here since 1986, so this is where I'm going to be.
Great, thank you. It sounded like with the discussion about the number of people that would be present at any given time, we did not talk about parking, but I'm assuming that there are enough parking spaces there. I did drive through and it seemed like it, but did we do a count?
We don't know Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Dempster, we don't know the parking count offhand, but that was, I believe, contemplated when the site plan was approved, but assuming it was a C1 use.
Okay, thank you. And then with our dark skies rules and ordinance, thank you, has the property been reviewed for dark sky compliance? Because I know we did get a letter from one of the neighbors that talked about the lights, so I want to make sure that we address that.
Right. Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Dempster, with the site plan approval, which occurred, I believe, back in 2008, yeah, they should have included photometric plans at the time, as well as cut sheets of the lighting out there. Now, has the lighting changed since then? Can't conclude that, but they would have.
I'll answer that for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so there were 150-watt metal halide lights, 3 of them across the back. There's also 2 parking lights in the back. There's also one in the front on the right corner towards Shea, and then one towards the middle of the property, which would be the end of our property. And those were parking lights. So there's 7 bright lights out on that property. When we took over the property, the ballasts were out on the metal halide lights. And so when we went to get them repaired, it ended up being, it was just wiser to replace the lights. So we replaced the lights, and we went from 150 watts to 100 watts. And they were at 4,000 K, which is soft white, bright white, daylight. And so we set the lights at 100 watts at 4,000 K, which is 50 watts less than the metal halide lights that were out there. And then we got the complaints. So I had the electrician go up there, and the lights can be changed. So we did change them to 3,000 K, which is considered, I believe, soft white. And they lowered it from 100 watts to 70 watts. And obviously, security is important for us. So they're 80 watts lower than what was approved in 2008, and they're 1,000 K softer, I guess. But we did repair the lights.
Okay,
So for a while, it was black out there. There's people, paraphernalia, and all kinds of crazy stuff back there. Or there was.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And just last question, that is an actual entrance, right? It's not a walkway from your parking lot to Firebrick Drive, correct?
No,
Is-
it's not an
is it-
entrance to the business. It's a walkway and an ADA.
It's just a walkway, okay.
I think it was an ADA access from the community into that center.
Okay,
Honestly, what we get is people walking their dog or
yeah,
in the morning. That's usually what
okay.
we get.
all right, great, thank you very much.
Yeah, and I saw you resealed your portion of the parking lot as well there. It looks pretty good. I went through there myself. Commissioner Watts, I think, asked the question, and I never heard an answer, I don't think, but as far as caliber limitations, is it going to be a rifle range as well? And
Yes, it goes up to 50 BMG.
338 Lapua.
Yeah.
Majority of the calibers would be 223, 9mm carbines. Those are what's commonly used, so it's very rare to have a very large magnum caliber, although it would be rated for that. That would be very occasional use.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
At $4 a round, it's very occasional. And who knows, it might go up to $8 with the way things are going, so.
One more question, I think, for Farhad. If we went with a zoning of C1, would it be applicable to the adjoining tenants, to Roof King, to State Farm, and so on? Is it that whole area, or is it specific to their facility?
It's the whole area, actually.
Okay.
It's the, as I mentioned, it's the building in which this would be located and is attached to a separate parcel,
Right.
but it's part of one contiguous commercial center, and it's all C1.
Okay, thank you.
Farhad, does that mean the other owners of the adjacent shops are all on board with a C1 to C2? Did I understand that correctly? This
as far as
this stands alone, correct, in terms of its rezone? The Roof King and the others still would remain C1 if we went down that path?
Correct.
Okay,
That's correct, yeah.
okay. A couple questions, again, not necessarily relevant to a rezone hearing, but I'm curious. With the lead capture, does that get classified as hazardous waste? And if so, how does that get managed? Internal, external, et cetera?
Yeah, the lead and the brass in the range are both recyclable materials, so they are not considered hazardous waste by U.S. Department of Transportation. And we do recycle that from over 430 ranges nationwide right now. So it's a very simple process where we'll mine the lead out, put it in sealed containers, and then it's DOT legal to transport for recycling. The only thing that is hazardous waste are the HVAC filters from the ventilation system, and we do dispose of those according to U.S. regulations.
Okay. And then parlaying on the ventilation statement there again, there's no shared ventilation with any of the adjacent suites, correct? This is all, you're completely self-contained there?
That's correct. The ventilation system is dedicated for just the shooting range. It does not tie into anything else in that building or other tenants.
Okay, very good. Then you said 60 air changes?
It's one exchange per minute, so about 60 per hour, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. Commissioner Kovacevic?
To piggyback on Commissioner Dempster's question, C1 parking is how many spaces per thousand?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Kovacevic, it depends on the use. So one for a doctor's office would differ than, say, for a cafe. But when a use comes in, we would want to make sure that there's enough parking out there already to accommodate it.
All right, so a retail use in C1 would be 4 per thousand?
That sounds about correct, yeah.
And, yeah, so just a little quick math, if I'm right, it'd be 30 spaces for 7,500 square feet. And petitioner said that he might have 25.
So there is something different with shooting ranges where we've got a space that's roughly, the range you said was 2,500 square feet is what we're planning. Only 8 people can occupy that space at any one time. So generally, most cities exclude the shooting range square footage from that requirement because there's a max of 8 people that can use it. That would be the only change, I would say.
Yeah, but we're making the same point. I mean, what I'm
There's
saying is,
plenty of parking.
you're saying
Plenty of
there's plenty of parking.
Yes, I think we have about 60 spaces. We have a lot of parking. As a matter of fact, that's one of the problems in there. A lot of people keep trying to use our parking, so. But we've got plenty of parking. That's not a problem.
I'm done.
Okay, shall we move on to the public hearing portion of the agenda item. Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, we do. Larry Myers.
Commissioner and Chair, I'm going to stand where I always stand. I am against every C1 to C2 rezone that has ever happened in the past and will ever happen in the future. So I don't think this should be zoned to C2 for all of the reasons stated in Farhad's presentation to the neighbors. But I also don't see this operation as being a C2 other than the fact that it is regional. That's probably the only thing I could see of the entire business that is a regional draw, is the shooting range. Because the rest of it, it's a store that sells guns and ammo. That's all it is. It's a retail store with a shooting range inside. So I would hope that you would consider allowing this use in C1, although I think perhaps looking down the road as you would look down the road for a C2 rezone, what could happen in the future. These gentlemen have a private club that they're talking about, which is high-end gun enthusiasts who know what they're doing. If you've ever been to a shooting range, there's a lot of people there that are not high-end gun enthusiasts who I would not particularly care for coming to Fountain Hills and using a shooting range in another C1 zone. So setting a precedent and allowing the use in C1, I don't know if I'm in favor of that, because just a regular old shooting range, you can get gangbangers and everybody else shooting sideways and everything else. And so might think about having more of a conversation, and I mean, I'm not trying to put these guys off or anything, but it might be C1 with some sort of SUP with stipulations to prevent it from being just a normal thing in any other C1 in town. That could be a regular old gun range and attract people that you don't want to Fountain Hills. So that's really what I came to say. I love the business. I think their plan is technically impeccable. I've seen a whole lot of plans that are not quite this detailed that have made it through for uses that have a whole lot less tax revenue and appeal to drawing a nice group of people to Fountain Hills, supplying town some revenue. It's a resident, and I just want you guys to consider the other aspects of setting up a precedent for regular old firing range in C1, and I'm not sure that it's possible. If it's not possible, then I'm going to have to fall on the side of letting these guys do it anyway, but that's what I came here to say. Thanks a lot. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Any additional speaker cards?
No, we do not.
Thank you very much. We will close the public hearing and open it back up to the commission for questions of staff and/or the applicant before taking any proposed action here. Commissioners?
One
Commissioner
last
Watts?
question. Are you going to keep the existing retail operation on Laser? Or are you going to move it down?
Yes, well, we're also, we do custom work, so we're gonna keep the custom work at Laser and take the product from Laser and deliver it for retail sales in the showroom at the new location.
Is there any history of accidents and management? I know when you've got a range master on, highly unlikely, but it has happened, and so the governance would fall to Maricopa County Sheriff's Office.
Yes,
How do they feel? I mean, that's really the question.
yeah, they'll probably be qualifying at our range. So one of the things that when we talk to the city about, and we're totally for this, is having it be a private membership. But depending on how this goes down with C1, with a special use, or however we do it, we would like to be able to still let police officers qualify. So that's kind of, when we talked, I think to Peter, I think he's the building safety guy. He was like, well, what's the use, da, 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 da. And I said, well, we're gonna have it be a private membership so that the level of training for each member is a high level of training. So that's kind of where we're at. And it's kind of open right now. We had no intention of making it a public range, but we do want to be able to let law enforcement qualify, which would have to make it some type of public access.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any more discussion? Farhad, I see your dilemma with this one and the write-up, which I think is a very good write-up. So I think this is one of the better write-ups that we've seen since I've been here on the commission, and I sit as conflicted as the write-up does in the end. You've got a parcel which probably should have been zoned C2 way back when. You got a parcel that was originally residential that a prior applicant got transitioned to C1, and now we're talking about going to C2. And we've got a parcel that was built while it was C1. The city allowed all of the buildings to face the rear of the parcel so that they could act more like C2 properties. Because I think the drive behind would actually be, by zoning definition, the front of those parcels, right? If they were C1, because they would need to face into the neighborhood.
Mr. Chairman, the front would be considered the shortest of the property lines, either the one facing Shea or Fire Brick.
Okay.
And in fact, I think, I'd have to look at the aerial, but I think there's a property line adjacent to Fire Brick, so that would be,
The
if I'm
front.
not mistaken, considered the
Okay.
front.
Yeah, I just think a C1, for all the reasons you called out in the report of being, for the local
Right.
adjacent residences, this parcel was never that. Having said that, I also don't like the idea of opening up the C2 unknown into the future. So if we took up the suggestion within the report, which I think is reasonable, to redirect this towards a special use permit but retain the C1 as the underlying zoning designation, what does that look like in terms of timeline and process and write-up? Has that been discussed at all with the applicant prior to tonight?
Mr. Chairman, and John could echo this or not, but since this particular use is not listed neither as something allowed by right in the C1 zoning district, but also not listed as a special use that could be granted within a C1 district, then it may require a text amendment to the zoning ordinance to specifically add live fire ranges indoor within the C1 zoning district with a special use.
Okay, and what would the timeline be to pull something like that together?
Well, staff could begin drafting an amendment to the zoning ordinance and come before you in October and seek a recommendation to town council.
Okay, so that would put,
Then that would, we would be looking at a November date for town council.
on the text amendment.
On the text amendment.
Well, if we did the text amendment, then this application becomes really null and void, right? It becomes administrative? Or would the text amendment require a special use permit?
So then they would actually have to apply for the special use permit. But what I'm considering is that we could run the text of their application for the special use permit concurrent with the text amendment, with a caveat that it wouldn't go into effect until the zoning changed. But that could cut down the time. And it may be also possible, the town council could say, we're going to go ahead and allow the interpretation for this particular applicant, but we want you to process the special use permit for subsequent actions. But we've got a couple of options there that I think we could follow, and we would try to make it go as quickly as possible.
Okay. And I just want to make sure I'm clear. It's the catchment of the use, not the actual activity, is what's airing this towards a C2 use, correct?
It's a combination of those things. Again, as Farhad stated, as we look at the specific listed uses in the C1 and the C2, it's not there, so what's most similar? I found more C2 listed uses that seem more similar than I did C1 uses that seem similar. And again, I had to think of it in terms of not just this limited size, but once you allow the use, bigger ones and some of the issues that you've talked about in terms of the environmental things, how they're dealt with, are they public or are they private? So again, I erred on the side of considering more of a C2 type use.
Okay. Not sure that this is the route that we necessarily go here, but I would like to hear from the applicant on what is your timeline? The last thing we want to do is impede a process that you've got other obligations hinged on. So what would, if we went down the route of text amendment, which would allow this use within a C1 zoning designation and with a special use permit, brought you back through in November, right? That's what we're saying? October for here, November. So November for council. So best case scenario, you're to council in November. Worst case, you're to council in December. How does that sit with you?
That's okay. I'm a resident also. So I do appreciate us trying to figure out a way to allow a high-end range and not open up the ability for somebody to put like a public range in to do exactly what some of the residents had stated. That's why we did this in the first place, is to have a place that was based on knowledge and wisdom and responsible gun ownership. So if it takes more time to do it right, then I'm totally for that. And I don't know the process. You guys are going back and stuff with, I don't know about that stuff. So I wouldn't, if I could have the approval by January, I would be perfectly okay. We're actually going through phases of development in the process right now. So we're trying to do the TCO for the actual showroom.
Okay.
And then we'll open up the members lounge and the training room next. So if whatever happens, if we could be in front of whoever we have to be in front of to get the approval before we place the order for the equipment by January, I'd be thrilled. I'd be appreciative.
Okay, I appreciate that feedback. So Farhad, John, what are the ill-intended consequences in your minds of doing this? We went down this path once upon a time at Trevino and Saguaro before your time, just barely, not fully appreciating the implications of what we did there. And I think we followed that up with the text amendment to kind of clean all of that up, correct? What in your mind are the unintended consequences in this case of going down that path?
Mr. Chairman, are you talking about the path where we propose a text amendment?
If we went down that C1 text amendment path. Could we put
frankly,
constraints?
I don't foresee any, I don't see any ill-intended consequences, as you mentioned. We would still go through the notification process, public notification, posting on the property, informing the landowners within 300 feet. So not dissimilar from what the applicant has already had to complete before coming before you.
would it be reasonable to work in, I mean, just not that anyone would design otherwise, but to work in language related to setbacks and noise, just to ensure that that's accounted for? Or is that just assumed within the review process? I think the last thing an adjacent homeowner certainly, and probably an adjacent business, wants to hear is a muffled pop, pop, pop.
Right.
Through their walls.
You're, Mr. Chairman, speaking of setbacks, are you
Well,
particularly building setbacks? or-
Just separations to, to make it an innocuous use, if it were to be built elsewhere in C1. I think this case is, really sits in isolation, but, 5 years from now, who knows what gets built?
Mr. Chairman, so if the applicant, assuming the text amendment is approved and the applicant were to come before you with the special use permit request, we would ask the applicant to lay out the parameters of the use in terms of some of the things we just spoke about with regards to the ventilation, construction of the interior, and should the council move forward with approving that request, it's going to be assumed that the applicant will follow those parameters, and if in a case where there might be some sort of possible violation, then John, as the zoning administrator, will determine whether or not a violation has occurred. So to answer your question, the parameters should be pretty well laid out in detail in the special use permit request.
Okay. Commissioners? Commissioner Watts?
I think I'm really in favor of the C1 zoning. And I think the reason is the hours of operation. If we change it to C2 and we allow 24 hours, whatever, then I think the negative impact is more consequential on the residents. And even though, walking the property, they're 400 feet apart, except for the one more to the west, which is about 190 feet or so from building to building. The C1 seems to be more reasonable because of the current hours of operation for what you do, because of the type of operation, and I would be against C2 zoning strictly on the hours and that negative impact.
I just want to add to that. I think we have a responsibility to buffer the residential properties there, and that the one home is their property line abuts the property line, all the residential. So I'd be in favor of amending or adding this use to C1 versus changing to C2.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you give somebody, we changed to C2 zoning, and you can build a 40-foot high building, and you can have a drive-through on that end cap over there for a fast food restaurant or whatever. I don't think that was ever the intent. I just don't see the intensity of this use being a C2 use. I do understand the argument about you're drawing people from further away, but you're not drawing that many people anyway. So I think we could, I'm okay with the text, if we want to go the route of a text amendment or whatever, but I'm also okay with saying this is a C1 use, so.
Okay. Going down that path, what's the most appropriate motion? A motion to deny or just revert it back to staff with a continuance for the time being?
Mr. Chairman, good question.
Well, he's got an application on the table right now. We've got to take some action.
Great. I believe the commission can reformulate or some direction back to staff with a motion to look into the possibility of proposing a zoning ordinance text amendment, staff initiated. And as for the special use permit that would follow, that would be up to the applicant.
Yes, Chairman, I think if you continue this to your next meeting, so we still have the rezoning out there, so whatever happens on the text amendment, you can either deny that then or whatever, based on what we bring back. I think that the continuous direction of staff would be the best.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't want to take this off the table just yet, so, okay. Commissioners, a motion?
I move that we continue the applicant's application until our next meeting so that we have a text amendment for C1 zoning in lieu of C2. And if that isn't quite wordy enough, I can keep
Well,
going.
let me, before we take that any further, John, with our other agenda item, next month was to potentially be our public engagement session there. So are we better to continue this for 60 days?
To your November meeting?
Yeah, I think that would be cleaner because we already pretty much committed ourselves to the other pathway.
That's true, yeah, depending upon how big of a meeting you think that will be. So that could be better. That gives us a little bit more time to really think through the options on the
And that
text
still
amendment.
works with the
And still could
applicants.
get them to council in December. I hope I have to look at calendar just a minute here, if you don't mind. I'm not sure. Maybe Angela knows when the council meets in December. They will probably meet just on the 6th and probably not on the 20th, I'm guessing.
Correct. They only meet once in December, and it is
Yeah.
December 6th.
So that's a little bit tight between the November 14th and the December 6th, but as long as we agree internally, we can make that work.
So, Commissioner Watts, would you consider
Rewording?
rewording?
Yeah, I suppose so. So I move that we suspend the request for planning for consideration for possible action and rezoning until our November, what was it? 14th, for further consideration.
And directing staff to work on a text amendment.
Yes, and staff will continue that, the verbiage side of it.
So text amendment to include this functional use within the C1 under a special use permit procedure. Is that clean enough? It's not really that clean, but we can work with it.
It'll work.
We know we're coming back on 11/14 to talk about this agenda item and/or the text amendment, and they'll both continue to run in parallel, at which point we would, if the text amendment looks great, we send that forward, and we recommend denial on this rezone, or the applicant just withdraws at that point, and then applies for special use permit in parallel. Okay. So the options are there to make sure that we stay on their timeline. Okay. Okay. Commissioners, a second?
I'll second that, and then next time it shouldn't take so much time, because you'll have written that up, and then we can just review, we already discussed it today, so it should be pretty short and pretty
Yes.
quick.
Okay. Angela, roll call vote, please.
Sure. One second. All right. Chairman Gray,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Schlossberg,
Aye.
Commissioner, is it DePaw or DAPA? Commissioner Corey,
Aye.
Commissioner Dempster,
Aye.
Commissioner, I'm sorry.
Kovacevic, aye.
Kovacevic, thank you. I knew I was going to butcher that one. And then Commissioner Watts.
Aye.
Thanks.
Very good. 7-0. Thank you, Angela. All right. Thank you, Farhad. Much appreciated. All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 6, discussion only point, but discussing the draft language for zoning ordinance text amendment to provide for drug and alcohol treatment centers and detoxification facilities within Fountain Hills. Mr. Wesley. You want to wait? Yeah, we'll wait. No, go ahead. John, let's take 5-minute recess. Sorry. I don't want Scott to miss out. All right, John, we're back in session.
Okay, Commissioners. So I think maybe, Chair, it was about a year ago in September that after we'd finished with our hospital ordinance issue that you suggested maybe the commission ought to go ahead and take up the issues of group homes and detox facilities and so
Sorry,
forth.
John.
And so here we are, still working on it. But, we did divide the overall project into two pieces, tackled the whole group home sober living piece first, and then coming back now to look at the detox and treatment center portion of that. So just a couple quick introductory slides because it's been a while since we've gotten a chance to talk about this, just to refresh. So zoning ordinance provides a list of permitted uses in different zoning districts. So within the current town code, detox facilities are not specifically listed anywhere as a use. Treatment centers are defined, but then are not listed in any specific zoning districts. As we work to place uses, we look at, as we just talked about in the last case, the intent of the different zoning districts and the types of uses that are already allowed, and then try to figure out where uses should fit in to that. We have taken some time to look at other zoning ordinances around the state, particularly in the valley, but around, found that these uses aren't typically discussed in zoning ordinances elsewhere either. And I've talked to staff in a couple of places, particularly in Prescott and Gilbert. They just treat detox centers and treatment centers as just any other kind of medical use and classify them in that regard. Mesa does require a council use permit for detoxification centers to go into commercial centers. That's the one place we found that did deal with any of these topics. So we've had some preliminary discussions in March and in May, kind of outlining, getting some viewer comments, some comments from the public about how we might address this. We have gotten the input through the town attorney and the town council that just ignoring the use is probably not in our benefit, because push come to shove, we would have to allow a use of this nature. We can't just ban them from our community totally. And so by taking the proactive step of determining where and how we want them in our zoning ordinance, if somebody wants to propose the uses, then we can say what happens rather than just having to accept something that might get pushed on us later. So that's where we are now in terms of having some of that input, is trying to move forward with possible ordinance language. So based on the discussion at the last meeting that we had in this, I believe back in May, the direction that I understood was that I was to take that information, put together a draft ordinance, put it out for the commission and the public for your review, and that we would then hold a subsequent input meeting, similar to we did the one back in January or February, whenever that was, over the community center, just giving the public the opportunity to come in and really discuss their thoughts and concerns. So while we may well get some public comment tonight, we're really looking for that to be at your next meeting when we really focus on that input. And again, a discussion tonight, if you'd like to have it, we're not looking for any action, but that we're really looking for discussion after people have a chance to really look at this, think about it, and prepare their comments. So with that in mind, with the direction and discussion we've had before, we've felt that the uses we're talking about are more likely C2, C3 uses, not CC or the C1 or the CO uses. We talked a lot about separation distances between uses that should be included, the need to establish some type of standards that could be associated with the uses to lessen their impacts, and that it'd likely be beneficial to have special use permit process so that we could look at specific situations, see how they were fitting into a neighborhood, or I use that term loosely, just in terms of whatever portion of the community that they're in. And by having a special use permit, if we did have any challenges that the standards weren't being followed, it gives us opportunity then to revoke that permit versus just a use by right. So with that in mind, we have 4 different uses that we're looking at and provided definitions for in the draft ordinance that's out. So 2 types of detoxification facilities, outpatient facilities where a person is going in, getting some medical assistance to help them through a detox situation. This is not too unlike any other type of medical office type uses, but it is on that outpatient basis. The person is not going through quite as significant of a detox process. The other is the detoxification facility inpatient. So this is the one that's got the serious detox. They need the medical supervision on a 24/7 basis while they go through that. It may last a few days, a week or so that they go through that detox process. And then the substance abuse treatment center, which really is meant to be, as it's defined in the ordinance, just treatment, no detox going on, any of that kind of activity. If that's going on, then that's back into the detoxification facility. And then that's, again, strictly on an outpatient type basis. This is pretty much the current Fountain Hills recovery operation that takes place down here on the avenue by Saguaro, where people come and get their treatment during the day, go through whatever classes and training and so forth, and then they go home, wherever that is, a group home or to their regular residence in the evening. And then the other option there at the substance abuse treatment center is with lodging. So this is where you're going through the treatment, but you're also living there for some 30, 60, 90-day period while you're getting your treatment. So it's a more intense inpatient kind of treatment that goes on. So that's the 4 types of activity that we've been able to identify and that we're including in this draft ordinance. So with that, starting with the simpler one, the substance abuse treatment centers. Again, we have an existing example of this use currently in town in a C2 use with no special use permits, no separation requirements, and no additional standards. So the thought here is that we would continue to allow that as it currently operates as a use by right in the C2 and C3 districts. Next, the ordinance moves into the substance abuse treatment center lodging with that lodging component, and also the detox centers inpatient. These are the most intense uses of the 4 outlined. And what the code suggests here is that these would be allowed only in the C3 district and only with a special use permit. That have to be state licensed, that have to provide for indoor waiting, so you don't have the people congregating outside. They have to provide for some type of contact information in case there are any issues, and with a 500-foot separation from any residences and 2,000-foot separation from any of the other uses that we've just been talking about. And when we put those parameters on this, the only area left in town for the use is this area shown in red here, east of Saguaro, along Colony on both sides, that little triangle-shaped piece. This is my approximation of our GIS person's better map, but pretty close to where these 2 uses would be allowed. And with a 2,000-foot separation from any similar use, you could only get 1 in there. That would be it for where these uses could go in town as the ordinance is currently drafted. The other of the 4 types of uses is the detoxification center outpatient. So here we are suggesting either the C2 or the C3, but still with a special use permit in either zoning district, and still requiring the state license, the indoor waiting, the contact person, and the separation of the 500 from residences and 2,000 from related uses. And when you do that, this map shows the areas where the use can happen. See if I can get that. And so it's the areas in red without the hatch are the areas where these uses could happen. And I'll go down to some more detailed maps. So one area that this then becomes possible is the Target shopping center, the Four Peaks Shopping Center, the Target building itself, and the areas kind of the south and west of that. That meets all the criteria as far as the separations. The same place over on Colony, east of Saguaro. Then we have this large area in the town center, but let me go through these. So go back that page. These areas have residential development in them, but they're still zone C2, so they technically meet that criteria. Here's the town center campus, so we're zone C2 also. So that meets that zoning criteria. Whoops, quit doing that. Whoops, wrong direction. So the only areas of actual C2 zoning that aren't really residential are up here, behind the Safeway where the Fountain View Village is, and then in the Plat 208 area. Now I'll move to the slide. But when we move to the Plat 208 area, we have 2 things that really restrict its ability to have either of these uses. One is that you've got Fountain Hills Recovery already in this area at the corner, when you put the 2,000-foot separation from that use to any of the other ones, or to the detox center outpatient, there's no space left. Plus, the planned shopping plaza overlay and its restriction of uses would not allow the uses, would not allow the detox center outpatient. So you really wouldn't ever get it in the Plat 208 area. So when we go back, whoops, wrong direction. When we go back to the slide, really the use couldn't happen anywhere in here. Certainly unlikely to happen on the town center campus. Very unlikely through any of the residential properties. And so that really only leaves, it's hard to do it this way. It really-
John, just while you're there, so
Yes.
we don't come back. Those residential properties, that would all be hatched on the overall map, right? Because of the 500-foot proposed?
No. It's hard to see on if this laser pointer works. There it is. So there's the hatch. Because the challenge here is that that residential is zone C2. And so we're saying it's possible in the C2 zone. Now, if we could make a slight amendment to that and say, base it on the use instead of the zoning. And so if we say, I'm not sure how I would word it, C2 zoning, unless it's used strictly as residential, then that would be another exclusion. Then we would either just exclude that or draw another 500-foot buffer from those. We'd have to see how that works, but that's why those areas are in there currently.
Yeah, I mean, just a note, not to hijack the presentation, but I think that that's a must.
Okay. So in that case, if that's what's done, then that leaves these two areas as really the only places in town for the detox facility outpatient. And the one on the right is the only place for the detox inpatient or the substance abuse treatment lodging. And so the last thing then, just in the draft ordinance, you may or may not recall when we did the previous ordinance for the community residences, when I did the public notice for that, I just noticed the residential districts. I forgot to put the commercial districts in there. Now we're in the commercial chapter of the ordinance, and it's kind of a related topic. So the ordinance includes making that change in the two places where it currently says group homes for the elderly, to change those to the community residences. So that is my presentation. And again, the idea is that you've got this now to look at and digest, and the public has this available now to digest. And we can come back next month for detailed discussion, but we'll certainly take any other comments you have this evening.
John, what was our final separation distance on the transient homes?
1320.
Commissioners? Commissioner Watts?
I think I have the same concern. I'm not a fan of the 2,000 feet. I'd still like to go back to the 2640. And maybe or maybe not, town council will override that once again. And the other consideration that I've got is the outdoor waiting space. I'd like to see that eliminated at a
Right.
personal level, make it the responsibility of the facilities so that the outdoor waiting is, they're not putting benches out there where people can congregate.
Well, right, so the requirement that's in there is that they're required to have indoor waiting.
Yeah, but under 2602, it's as an example, sufficient indoor activity and waiting space to limit outdoor waiting.
Yeah,
I would change limit to eliminate.
I have the
Well-
same note.
Okay.
Sure, we can look at that, but I'm not sure how you can prohibit somebody from standing outside a building.
Well, I don't think you can eliminate, I don't think you can prohibit them from doing that, but I think you don't want to make it conducive for them to
Right. No,
accumulate
that's the
outside. So
idea.
not big patios and,
Right, right.
pergolas up and all
Right,
that stuff for them.
right. So that would be part of that site plan review, would look to make sure they're not
So you
putting
think
those
building
things there.
code would cover that as
Well,
opposed to?
the special use permit, we would look at the specific situation, but I can see if there is a way to strengthen that language a little bit, but, yeah. As long as you understand we can't prohibit it, but we can make it as, conducive as possible, as undesirable as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Corey?
Yeah, just to clarify, so the two examples you gave us where, yes, it could go, that's with the 2,000-foot separation?
So, so the 2,000-foot separation would be between any two of the same type of use. And none of these areas are big enough to have more than one anyway. So you can make that
So even
distance.
at 2,000, that's the only option?
Yeah, even at 2,000, you could only have one in each.
Yeah.
And if you made it 5,000 square feet, or 5,000 feet, you could only have one in each.
Okay,
So that really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So using the Four Peaks just as the shrewd example here, if someone were to redevelop, I think it was Pier 1 or the Dollar Store or something is west of Target there. Someone could, under these guidelines, redevelop that portion of the shopping center into a detoxification with lodging business. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yes, with a special use permit. Or conversely, there's been some discussion about redeveloping that area to the west into a multi-residence development. And if they did that, you'd get rid of that red area, or most of it, and maybe a little bit bigger than 500 feet across.
In this scenario, my concern is if that scenario were to happen, and if Target or whomever the big box is was to remain, I guess master development clauses aside, and we have no idea what's in any of those, but I would think allowing something next to our, I'll call them our anchor tax base partners in the town, I think that might not go over so well. I don't have any suggestions as to how we would eliminate that. I think in general, I think this is all headed in a very positive direction, but I do worry about that piece specifically, with respect to those commercials. It's almost like it needs some nominal separator from other businesses as well, and doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be on the same order as the residential component, I don't think, but any thoughts on?
We can sure take a look at that, Chairman. I guess just on the surface of it, it sounds challenging if we're trying to limit it to commercial districts to begin with, and then you're going to separate it from a commercial use in a commercial district. It becomes very limiting. But so I think the main fallback here is the requirement for the special use permit, because you don't have to approve that, particularly if it's having challenging meeting some of the other requirements that would go with it. But.
And what would happen? What would happen if we added language in? Let's just stick with the 500 for the time being. But what if we added in schools, daycares, and parks? That typical language that we see. Would that change those maps at all?
Chairman, that would depend upon the distances that you put with each one of those. As I looked at it before in our earlier drafts, using some of the separations we have in the ordinance currently for the medical marijuana facilities and the, I think it's the, I'll try to speak a little louder for you, thank you. That if we use some of those same distances we had elsewhere, that they really didn't impact it much compared to what these two do. That 500-foot residential really seemed to cover the area pretty well, and do anything more, we're not going to end up with any areas where they can go, and I think then we're back to a challenge.
Problem,
yeah. These are pretty limited.
I guess my thought would simply be, before we head into a public feedback session, I think we'll get a lot of feedback if we don't have schools and parks and daycares addressed. So I'd at least like to study that
Okay.
and hold that off to the side. I've got a few other things, but commissioners, any? Okay. And these are just questions at this point in general. I'm happy to send these to you, but page 32 of the packet, so the front end. Curious, we say substance abuse treatment centers. I'm wondering if we should consider saying substance abuse / addiction treatment centers in that same, just to catch all, maybe a little broader terms, just something to consider.
Sure.
And then the last sentence on that opening page, so again on page 32 of the packet, we say typically for a period of 30 to 90 days, which I think was relevant predominantly for the transient homes, but I don't understand these detox arrangements quite at the same level, but I think that a lot of intense detox is really on a 5 to 10, maybe 14-day window, and then they're moved into the transitional transient home. So I would like to not have that last sentence in there because I'm afraid that might be a loophole to allow for high-intensity detox outside of this ordinance. I think there's a little loophole there. It's probably.
Okay. Certainly we'll look at that. At the time I wrote it, I was trying to cover another gap that I felt like existed between the sober living homes and other types of living facilities, but it's been a while now since I went through that thought process to remember why I came up with that. But we can look at that again, certainly.
And I appreciate you clarifying 26C. I couldn't figure that one out, but now I understand. I have the same note as Commissioner Watts on the language on outdoor waiting. It just says to limit, and that's somewhat suggestive is the way I read it as well. And I'm curious, again, just as kind of an ad alternate, if we went back to the 1320, and I appreciate where Commissioner Watts is coming from, but if we went to the 1320 for separation between centers instead of 2,000, given that would align with, what we put in place for homes, would that change the potential outcome scenarios, or is it kind of one and the same, and why poke the bear if we don't need to?
So I'd have to go back and measure for sure. But as we look, excuse me, as we look at these two examples we have on the board currently, I don't believe that's 1,320 feet across.
Okay.
I think you'd still end up with one there. All the way from this corner to that corner, that might be 1,320. I'm not sure. So maybe that gives you two instead of one in
Yeah, and I
terms
guess
of,
I would just
which way was it?
suggest if we're achieving the same desired outcome with either measurement, then
In this one, again, if we ignore the shopping plaza overlay district that would currently prohibit the uses and just went on the distance, then if that's only 1,320, so now you would be starting to allow something up here, because it'd be more than 1,320 from the existing here.
okay. So it sounds like 2,000 is a good number. Section F, 3, just was thinking maybe we require signposted contact, so it's published and not a little more easily accessible. Somewhere in section F, I don't know if we can do it or not, but I'd like to address the group smoking that tends to, certainly happens in the residences. I assume that it would maybe a little bit worse in the detox process. And that's pretty much it. I thought, in general, I thought the write-up in the draft is in pretty good shape, so I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I did mention adding schools, parks,
Yes.
daycare, childcare, where we can get that in. I think that's beneficial.
We'll see if we can't go ahead and get those maps prepared and post them online or something so people can see them.
Okay. And then on substance abuse treatment center lodging, thoughts on requiring perimeter fencing on those properties? I don't know if that's something that an ordinance can dictate or not, but something I just jotted down. And that's it. Commissioner DePaul, any feedback for John? Commissioner Corey?
Yeah, only that I think this was written up very well, and I know we've been talking about this for a while, so I think you've done a great job of taking our feedback and incorporating it into here, and just wanted to comment on that.
Commissioner Dempster?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, John. Great job. I just have a couple of questions. I too had highlighted the limited outdoor waiting, so I'd like to see some changes with that. And this, I don't know, what is the difference between being licensed or certified by the state? So is that, because we specify that, but a copy of the license or certification by the state, are there different levels that we need to, does it make a difference, or?
Chairman, Commissioner Dempster, again, it's been a little while since I wrote that to remember exactly, but I think I was just covering my bases.
Okay.
In case of whichever it may be that the state has, we've got to have that from the state.
Okay. And then, my other question.
Actually, you were wise to do that because Department of Health Services just in September changed their licensing scheme. So CMS is now licensing and the state is no longer licensing. Clairvoyant you are.
Oh, and in the different sections, it has contact information and process for resolution, and I'm sure the process would cover this, but do we need to be specific to get contact information of the property owner? Because I know at times if the property is, if you have a, you know, the property owner really needs to know if there's an issue or violation or something. Just a thought. I don't
Okay,
know.
now we could add some clarity to that.
That's all I have.
Very good. Commissioner Schlossberg. Commissioner Kovacevic.
Thank you, John. This is pretty much the way I remember it, so thanks.
And Commissioner Watts.
I think the 2,000 feet, without the benefit of some distances on the overlay, works fine, and I'm happy with it after you've explained it. I want to reiterate the limiting outdoor to eliminating, and I think that solves a lot of problems. Even the adjoining properties, being retail or whatever, becomes the responsibility of the facility, not, and the other tenants would be, or the other retail spaces would be more comfortable not having to deal with that. And I think by building codes and county codes, the smoking issue becomes a code issue. So I think that's kind of implied in the whole specification. Other than that, I think it's a nice job.
Okay.
Thank you.
Angela, do we have any speaker cards on the agenda item?
Yes, we do. Jane Bell.
Well, we've been down this road before with the detox, but this time it's a little bit different. There's a lot of different layers of treatment that you're talking about here. And you're talking about taking that and putting it in a commercial, plus staying away from the schools, kids, churches, and the rest. this really needs to be taken time. We have a detox right now. It's at the entrance of the Avenue of the Fountains. Now, that's already in a commercial. And if you're even talking about 500 feet, how far is that from the apartments that's right across from it? With the different levels of treatment, to me, going into these commercial areas that people have invested money in for other businesses, and you have a live-in treatment center and all the rest, I think this really needs to be thought out. I still am, and we told you last time, I'm in favor of the 2640. And the reason I am, North Carolina has taken this, they've gone through the Fourth Circuit. And I think that needs to be really researched out on these maps. I think we need to see where this 500 is or where 2640 would be, and consider the commercial people that are in those areas and what's going to be around them. I think this is a big decision. I think we really need to take our time with this and research out all of this, everything. Now, I went on in my mind and I put down some points, and I said it to you last time, but this is more than just a plain detox in and out. I think that one thing that should be considered is the number of people that are in the treatment center. I think it should be 5 plus the medical. I think anybody who's in treatment that wants to go to a hospital should be let go to the hospital, not holding them. No one should be admitted if they don't have the mental capacity to know where they are. This is important. That person needs to go to the hospital, not to go into a detox center. If they want to go to the hospital, they really need to be let go. And to go to the hospital, they should not be held. And that needs to be in an ordinance. I think I had a lot of things I could have put in here with the ordinance. I'll hurry. But tonight, the talk has been all on the footage. We need to put a lot more in this, insurance and everything else. So we need to really talk about this and get into it along with the footage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bell.
We have Liz Gildersleeve.
Good evening, Commissioners, Chairman. Keep in mind that we know that detox is already happening in the detox homes in our neighborhoods. They are not sober homes, as the owners would like us to believe, and the neighbors who live next to one can vouch for that. That said, what is preventing our town from simply stating in a text amendment that a commercial detox facility is not allowed in our small town? It seems like we're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. Why not ban them outright? What is preventing us from doing that? I understand the reasoning with the sober homes, but I'm not understanding why we have to have this in our community. We already allow detox homes in our neighborhoods. A commercial detox facility would simply encourage more detox homes in our neighborhoods, which is a lucrative prospect only for detox homeowners that bus in most of their customers from outside our community. Regarding the first draft provided by staff for the text amendment, one thing that jumps out at me are the minuscule distances proposed between detox facilities and residential neighborhoods. For example, only 500 feet would separate a detox facility from a neighborhood. That's less than a city block. And only 2,000 feet between detox facilities, that's substantially less than a mile. And how many does a small town like ours need anyway? And what about, as Chairman Gray said, what about distances from schools, parks, and preschools? Would any of you like your children or your grandchildren or your neighbors' children to ride their bikes or walk past a detox facility on their way to school? Or maybe to go get a Slurpee at the Target? Visit the ones down Shea going west and you'll have your answer. I believe Larry Myers sent photographs to most everybody here in the recent past on what that future might look like, and it is not pretty. Bottom line, it should not be easy to open a commercial detox facility in our community if it should be allowed at all, not when there are already dozens in Scottsdale, Phoenix, and Tempe. Near as I can tell, Paradise Valley doesn't even allow them or makes it very difficult, just as they bravely did with detox homes in their neighborhoods. Let's follow Paradise Valley's lead on this. Let's contact them. Let's add that to our research and hopefully come up with the right solution for our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gildersleeve.
Larry Myers.
Chairman, Vice Chair, Commissioners. So without belaboring the 4-year court battle I endured in Texas and the cost, I can assure you that there will be no businesses in the Four Peaks Business District that will appreciate any one of the types of facilities that John mentioned, as all of them, or shall I say, none of them are benign. Outpatient clinics are filth. Outpatient clinics overrun every neighborhood and business in their general vicinity. Outpatient clinic personnel, the clients, have a migratory pattern of a mile. So consider that. I know you say you can't ban them, but I'm telling you right now that the neighborhood across the street on Shea Boulevard, those residences that are over 500 feet away from this place, are ruined. Absolutely ruined by even the most benign of these activities. Some are worse. My businesses in Austin, Texas, were directly next to inpatient, outpatient, lodging, all of them combined, and I can guarantee you that's why I went to court for 4 years to get rid of them. They're done, the building's bulldozed, the neighborhood's cleaned up. So I came before you guys, God knows how long ago. I told you that that's where you will be. You will be right where I was by allowing any of this, except for maybe in that little triangle. And even that triangle of commercial businesses will be screwed. So I don't know, I don't have a solution, and I'm usually a solution guy. I say make it so difficult that it's impossible financially to do it, because the base level of the conversation here is, in fact, none of these people in these places, or very few of these people in any of these places, are people from Fountain Hills. And so why are we even discussing this? Because they're not us, they're them. And you're bringing them to ruin us. So I'm as emphatic now as I was on the first day, and I get it, it's hard, but never say never and never say can't, because I didn't in Austin, Texas, and I succeeded. And so, and they said the same thing. Oh, you can't. Yes, you can. That's my final word on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Myers.
There's no one else.
Thank you, Angela. All right. John, the option, the opportunity, the study on prohibiting. Thoughts?
Chairman, we had advice from legal counsel 6-9 months ago. We can go back and look at that again, but that's the information that we got at that time.
I suppose maybe if we head into our public session, we should revalidate that position.
So I guess I'll back up from that just a moment, Chairman. As I recall, I mean, and we talked about this, or I included a little bit in my introduction, we could choose to do nothing and just wait and see if somebody ever applies for one and deal with it at that time. The challenge then is we may be forced into something and then we don't have a code to give us any direction.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of doing nothing. I know we've had that suggested a few times, but I certainly appreciate that side of it, and giving us some rules to play by. So, did we look? Paradise Valley has a very different model or different approach, or maybe it's even an unwritten approach to some degree. What does that all mean?
And again, I know I've looked at it, but it's been a while, so I'll go back and look at them again specifically. But they are a very different community with very limited commercial type areas and activities, and most of it is through special permits versus having commercial zones like we do. So, but I'll look at it again and see.
I just recall the underpinnings of Paradise PV's model was essentially you must, as part of your special use permit, you must prove that it's of benefit to the community, so to speak. And that's a very generic summation of it, but it'd be interesting to study that and see how it actually plays out or has played out. So, commissioners, any additional direction or thoughts for John? Our next meeting, our October session, will be used as the public engagement session for this particular ordinance. So what we get on the table here today is what will go out in that session and be discussed and commented on. Commissioner Watts?
I think some of the comments from the public are worthy of seeing how far we can go. There's no doubt.
Yes.
And I think that the requirements that we had on some of the community homes, the sober living homes, and the requirements as far as licensing and supervision and all of those should also be incorporated similarly to what we ended up with the final version. So I'd like to see those types of things included as well.
Commissioner Corey.
Thank you. And I just wanted to have on the record that I get discouraged when I hear over and over again from people saying that we're doing this to help people that live outside of Fountain Hills. And I think that is completely wrong. I think there are people in our community that we need to support as well. So I feel like we keep hashing this out over and over and over again, trying to make the opportunities for these types of services so narrow that they're not going to be able to come here. And I just want us all to remember that, we're doing this to support our own community as well. I am sure there are people in those facilities that are from Fountain Hills. There are probably people from other towns that come here, people from here that go to other towns. But this is our community that we want to help and support. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I concur with you on that. And that's why I think, if I recall, I think that's what's unique about the Paradise Valley model is it essentially says, demonstrate the benefit to this community, not that you're going to use us as a, as a branding draw for your center. So I concur with you. I would like to see that as a part of this, if it's possible, if it's viable, I would like to see that component brought into the special use hearing process of you must demonstrate that this, that this is for this community, et cetera.
Maybe we could have that discussion next.
If you really want to.
I do.
Okay. Last call for comments. Everybody got, very good. Thank you, John. Let's move on to agenda item 7, section 202, special use permits and possible amendments. Again, another discussion item only, no action other than direction.
Correct. Thank you, Chair. And after we get done with this one, if you want to delay the parking one, I'm fine with that, but I did want to talk about this one tonight because it does tie in to the other discussions that we're having. So, zoning ordinance, Chapter 2 lays out our procedures for processing of different types of applications, rezoning, special use permits, temporary use permits, site plans, and variances. As Farhad and I have had the opportunity over the last couple of years to use the existing ordinances and the provisions, we've had some challenges and seen some opportunities for improvement, help make them more usable, more readable, more consistent, and to address some concerns. So while I want to go over time through the whole Chapter 2, because each section stands on its own, we can do it section by section. And so wanting to do that and starting with the special use permits, because I think there's some things that we can do there. Again, Chairman, that was a good lead-in that can help us deal with them in general with some of these tough issues that we're trying to deal with. But just a couple of examples here in terms of the existing ordinance and challenges we have. Notice requirements. In Section 201, which deals with rezonings, under the Section C hearings, that's where we find the notice provisions that go with rezonings, and it specifies a 15-day notice. In Section 202D, under Commission actions and findings, that's where we find a paragraph that deals with notice requirements. And it says after proper advertising, but doesn't tell us what the proper advertising is. So again, we have, if you're going to look and try to find what's the notice provisions, there's not a consistent place to go and look at it. So by going through the whole ordinance, and I have been through the whole ordinance and actually drafted all the changes, at least as a first blush, one of the things I've done is being able to organize each section so they follow the same pattern. So I know I can go to the same section, each one, and find the notice provisions. I don't have to guess where it's going to be. And then also make sure they're all consistent in what those notice requirements are. So again, Section 202 deals with special use permits. You have in your packet the details of the changes that are being proposed. So here's just a kind of a quick overview. Section 202A provides a purpose for the special use permits. There's no changes proposed to that particular section. Section 202B currently is some general regulations. To keep the format the same and all the other Section Bs, I'm laying out the application procedures and requirements. So switching that in this case so that 202B is application requirements. And so we'll be changing that so it reflects our current electronic provisions rather than the way it's currently worded, that's paper type of requirements. Provide a little bit more detail on the information that is required with your application. Currently, the wording for special use permits is that if the zoning administrator thinks a site plan is helpful, he can require it, which we typically do at some level. So adjusting the wording to say a site plan is required, but then the zoning administrator can kind of adjust that down if there's not as need for as much detail as might be in other cases. But we start off with a site plan being required, and then moved a couple other pieces of information into this section. Then Section 202C, review, is mostly a new section. Again, will be consistent throughout the different sections of this chapter, but provides an overview of the process that an applicant goes through to get the review from the staff initial review to see if all the requirements have been met, and then kind of that back and forth and setting it up then for the actual hearing process. Then 202D lays out the notice requirements. And so we included the things that are in the current ordinance, but expanded upon a little bit. In practice, we always advertise special use permits just like we do rezonings with a sign posting, mailed notice, and newspaper. It doesn't say that we have to do that in the code currently, but we're going to update the code so it says that to make sure we're providing the public with good notice for special use permits. Because this town does operate a lot on special use permits, we see a lot of those. We want to make sure people have the opportunity to know about them as best as we can. Then section 202E will be hearings. So it lays out that process we go through for the hearings here and at the town council. This section is mostly new. Again, it provides an overview of what that would be, tells who can appear, establishes some time limits, allows the body involved to request some investigations into the topic, and then for the summary, basically the minutes and the action that's taken. 202F then describes the action that can be taken. Again, it's mostly the same as existing sections 202D and E, but with some minor modifications. One current provision in there is that the maximum length of continuance is 60 days. Generally, that's not a problem, but we have had a couple of cases where that has been a challenge because of the time it can take to go back and forth with an applicant, write the report, get back on. So I don't know if we're kind of looking for the commission direction on here. Do we want to keep that 60-day? That's a benefit to the applicant. They know they're not just left hanging out there forever. Somewhat to the public because they know it's going to get resolved, and they too aren't just, when's this ever going to end? But it can be a constraint when there are needs to investigate a topic and delve into it a little bit deeper. You don't have to answer this right now unless somebody has some feelings on that, but I'm looking at the possibility of removing that provision or lengthening it out to 90 days or something.
Is there an opportunity to request an extension?
The way the code is currently written, no.
No? Okay,
60 days is the maximum.
thank you.
Yeah, I'm along the same lines as Commissioner Dempster. I think the 60 has helped keep us on track more than it has been an impedance, but then again, I don't see it from the same angle you do. So, if we could layer in language that allowed for continuance, and frankly, I'd even be fine with continuance that's mutually agreeable between administrator and applicant. I don't see how that impacts us in any way.
Okay, I'll look at maybe some alternate language on that piece. So the next piece that we're adding in here that I think gets back to some of your comments a moment ago, Chairman Gray, is that here's where we can add some of the requirements for what you look at for taking your action, and one of which that we have proposed is to add this good neighbor policy in there so that for any special use permit, we can require them to give us these details on how they are going to interact with their neighbors, give us some of the information we were just talking about with regard to the detox facilities and so forth, but would be there for any type of use.
I totally concur with that. The only thing that not the challenge, but the enhancement on that, I guess, would be to write that in a way that's an essential part of the deliberation and not less suggestive, more mandatory in order to pass through the special use permit process. If that makes sense or not.
Yes, I think so. Let me see. I'll turn here real quick to that section and see exactly how it was worded. So right now it says the commission may make recommendations to the town council and include a good neighbor policy. So it again leaves it open. You don't necessarily need it in every case, but you probably will want it in a lot of cases. So there may be a way to write that so it does make it a little bit more mandatory. I can look at that.
Yeah, and so that it's more than a box tick. It's actually of substance and weighted in your overall decision-making for recommendation.
Okay, see if there's a way to do that. And then the last one is currently there's a requirement that special use permits get to town council 8 days after, commission action. Well, that really never happens. There's more time than that between the meetings. So I'm just removing it. We always process them in an expeditious way. We don't just let them sit. The next in 202G sets time limits. It's the same as the current 202F.
Can you go back one slide just for a second? do we have the opposite in there where there's a cap on the amount of time that something can sit so that it couldn't inadvertently be deferred on the council agenda? You know, is there a 60-day cap on the amount of time between a commission and council agendized, that's not a word. Or do we need to look at that kind of safety mechanism?
We could. Again, that's what this was meant to do, is make sure it gets to council as quickly as possible. And if we take this out, there's nothing, no cap on it, so it could sit. I'll have to think that through a little bit. While we could put, maybe it's a 30-day or 60-day, again, to make sure it happens, but it can fit with, whatever it's one of the challenges you run into the summer break. If P&Z approves a special use permit in June and council doesn't meet till the end of August, well, then you've got, however long that is before it's going to get there. And so we'd have to probably take that.
Maybe just leave it as not necessarily heard, but on the agenda, on the docket, so to speak, so that they know when it's going to be heard.
The other part of that is that the mayor technically sets the agenda, and we don't necessarily want to force the mayor into this. So anyway, we'll look at it and see. Right now, I just took it out because 8-day was definitely too short. We can see if there's something reasonable to put back in. Okay, time limits. So right now, we have a 6-month, right? 6-month time limit that you have to secure a building permit after you approve a special use permit. That's usually a challenge. We're usually back extending the special use permit at least once, sometimes twice. Maybe that's a good thing still, though, to kind of keep them moving. But maybe it'd be better to have that extended out a little bit longer than 60 days. You definitely want a time limit because you don't want people doing too much of a speculative thing. You don't want conditions to change too much.
Yeah, maybe you just change that to application opened. I agree.
Apply
60 days, especially now, 60 days is
It's 6
too
months.
tight. Or 6 months,
6
sorry.
months, yeah. Maybe 6 months for application of a building permit and
I
a year
would
to
be-
get it approved or something
What do
along
you
that
think,
line.
Dan?
It's still taking a long time to get plans and stuff now, and that's the,
Yeah, I mean,
that's where you run into problems now, is you can't turn that stuff around as quick as you could 5 years ago.
yeah, I'd at least flip it to application, not permit in hand.
Okay.
That removes some of that administrative burden on staff, but I'm not opposed to extending it either.
Okay. All right, we'll see what we can come up with on that. Then 202H revocation is the same, and the 202I was a 202B, just moved it down. And the other thing that wanted to accomplish with this is to add something in, and so 202J is modifications and amendments. We have no direction in the current code about what to do if somebody wants to amend or modify an SUP after it gets approved. And so we've added that section there and divided into the 3 parts. A minor modification, anything that doesn't materially, change what was approved. I've tried to think of good examples, and every one I could kind of come up with was maybe a good example, but it's too easy to also find a loophole in it why it might not be a minor. And so I'm a little bit hesitant to name something. But it'd be something, again, pretty minor. But if we don't consider it a minor, or if it is actually changing a specific condition of approval, then it would be considered a major modification and come back through the same public hearing process. Or if it's an actual amendment, we're going to change from this use to this use. So they're really amending it, then that obviously comes back through the public hearing process. So that's what we have in the code as far as an amendment to that particular section. And again, one of the reasons I want to keep at least this section moving fairly quickly is as it ties into the discussion we just had on the detox centers, because those, if we proceed down the route we're talking about, they will probably require a special use permit. And so having our tools cleaned up on how we process special use permits and some of the additional things that we can require with those special use permits, I think will be helpful.
Okay. I'll run it the other way. Commissioner Watts?
I think John that in light of the timing issues, that the onus seems to be most of the time on the contractor or the applicant. But I don't think there's any time constraints in item C on staff. And should there be? You know, I hear a lot of frustration from contractors about how long it takes to get things done. You've addressed it in the 6-month, getting the building permit, and that's a combination of the contractors and staff. But should there be something that was more specific about what's the turnaround time once the application is complete, not to get the application complete, but once it is complete?
So you suggest we should add something in here to keep it moving?
I think that if I was applying, I would say, what's my expectation? Do I need to have everything, can I get everything done by staff in 30 days? Is that reasonable after I complete my part? But I'd like, you know, a dead end and something about for the contractors.
Sure. Chairman, Commissioner, we can look to see if there's something we feel comfortable putting in here. We do have our standard review processing schedule that's posted, and we review with applicants when they come in and show that it's usually about a 2 to 3 month time frame from when they apply till we get to the commission hearing. We also have, through a state statute, a published maximum turnaround time for any application that we have to follow. And so that's already out there. That's very general and very long, though.
Yeah, I think if we're putting pen to paper on everything else with timelines on it, then it's fair to put the same thing. And the other thing is that it's a personal comment. I went through and read all of the bullet points, highlighted all of them, then got to the revisions, and they were all taken care of, so I only ended up with one. So, it was the wrong order, from my perspective anyway, so just a comment, but thank you.
Commissioner Kovacevic?
I have nothing else.
Commissioner Schlossberg? Commissioner Dempster?
Just a quick question. The good neighbor policy, is that a policy documented somewhere? I couldn't find it.
No, it's just a title that gets used. I've seen it in other codes. And I was thinking about that a little bit as I was kind of preparing for this meeting. It may need benefit from a little bit more definition about what we mean by that. A good policy, a good neighbor statement. Anyway, meant to describe, here's the things we are going to do as operator of this business to make sure we are a good neighbor and address any concerns that may come up because of the use that we're putting in.
So maybe having something a little bit more formal around that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, I think that'd be a good idea. Yeah.
It could be similar to what we did with the citizen participation ordinance, where we have a separate guide that we could give people, say, okay, if you need to do a good neighbor policy, follow this. This is going to tell you what you need to put in there. Rather, you put too many things in code, that becomes too rigid. So there's a balance there.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner DePauw? Okay. John, just to pick up on Commissioner Watts's, maybe it's as simple as referencing ARS such and such for the maximum timetables, or
Yeah, maybe that's for Fountain Hills. Everything is a 90-day administrative review and 180-day substantive review for a total of 270 working days. They're quite long, and that way we're always within them. But
Commissioner Watts's applications are always pristine, so he wants faster. Anywhere we can interject.
That brings up one more comment, though, before, seeing as how you say they're pristine. What do you do about, is it mandatory that everything be done online as far as an application?
Yes.
What about people that still have old flip phones and you can't do it? Do you have a process that says you can fill out a paper form and then somebody on staff can enter that electronically if somebody isn't computer literate? Or is it just too bad?
so if we could get the microphones turned off and the TV turned off, I'll answer your question. So no, yeah, they're all electronic, but we do have some of our citizens that are challenged with doing that, and so we help people get them in if they need it. Yeah.
Commissioner Kovacevic wanted to ask about a roundabout provision. Just kidding. All right, is that,
That's it for my presentation.
okay. Are you good with the feedback you've received?
Yes, that was helpful. We'll
Very good.
look at tweaking that. And so I guess my last piece on it, though, would be, I don't know what your sense is of the public interest and input that we'll see next month compared to what we had when we talked about the sober living homes back in January, February, wherever that was. Do you think we could also have this item on that agenda next month?
I would think so.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to be nearly the output of the residence component.
Okay. Okay.
So, and frankly, if it's just those three, I'd be fine tabling the next agenda item
Yeah, that's fine.
as well.
We've been a while
Any
on that.
informal objection, commissioners?
I think you may have a speaker card.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, we do.
Sorry.
That's okay. Larry Myers?
I should have guessed, huh?
So forget it, I'm not repeating it again. I have a question more than anything else, and does this comment belong in this discussion? And that would be very quickly, one of the things that has been discussed and probably maybe one of the abuses of the SUP process in this town is not whether John and his people get stuff done. It's you grant an SUP and it never gets developed and it sits there and has no expiration date. Does that belong in this conversation? Because if it does, I would expire it. Does it expire?
If they don't get a building permit within 6 months.
Well, okay, suppose they get the building permit and then they don't put a shovel in the ground.
Let me double check, I think so.
Inspection every 6 months, they're required,
Anyway, that's my comment, because we have multiple SUPs floating around out there and no buildings going up. And I'm sure they've got building permits.
Could be. See, that's a good point. We'll check and make sure.
Okay.
That's the idea.
I'm applying for a job.
Any other speaker cards? Thank you.
No.
All right, we are going to table agenda item 8. Let's move to 9, commission discussions, request for research to staff. John, I'd just like to go all the way back to the beginning and just formalize from the call to the public. Mrs. Bell referenced House Bill 2389, and I just wanted to make sure that we've got that on the radar as something to track.
Yeah, yes and no. Let me go back and see here. What section of the code do I want? 5. So, Commissioners, the ordinance that we typically refer to as the noise ordinance is not in the zoning ordinance. It's another part of the town code. And so that doesn't come to this commission for review. There is a provision in, I think it's in 5.19, if this will pull up, that does relate to it. So there is that connection to the zoning ordinance. And what we have is, I think, out of date because it wasn't updated when the last update was done to town code. But that may be something we'll want to look at again. I've encouraged Ms. Bell to make another trip to the town council and bring that up with them, see if they want to state it again.
I'm sure she said no.
She said she appreciated the opportunity to get the dress rehearsal here, and she's looking forward to the opportunity. Yeah. She can't hear me.
You notice how he gets a little quiet when he's specifically referencing you, right? Always. Commissioners, any other requests for research? All right. Number 10, the inverse.
All right, so I think you gave me a lot of good things this evening to work on. Farhad and myself, I guess, both got some work to get done for your October meeting.
Okay. The October meeting would be
Oops,
October.
10th.
10th.
Yep.
I may be a dial-in for that meeting, just heads up.
It's fall break, so I might be as well.
I'll certainly attend, but
Okay. Let's see if we can find out some of those possible conflicts soon, because we could potentially then maybe move it.
the 10th? I don't know. That was 1492. It was a long time ago.
I just have fall break, so I'll most likely not be here. I could call in too.
I don't know if the 3rd of October is an option, but that I am sure works for me.
John, October 10th is Columbus Day, so are you guys working? Yes, okay. Wasn't sure.
Let's not do a public engagement session on a holiday when people are home with kids and whatnot. That may not go over very well. In fact, I think we did our last one on we did
Valentine's
something.
Day.
We got yelled at, I remember that,
Valentine's Day.
which Scott is very
Still paying the price.
pro-Valentine's Day. He was very upset that night.
Okay, we'll look at that date.
Close the 3rd, if we want to stay on a Monday.
Yeah, we'll look at it and get back with you.
Okay. Number 11, report.
Nothing to add.
Number 12, adjourn. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Angela.